Around Christmas time, I visited one of our hospitals and noticed a sign for a class on postpartum depression. And it struck me that this must be such a difficult time for young mothers who are struggling. We all agree that babies are wonderful, babies are a blessing, they are. But every one of us who has longed and prayed for a baby and held that miracle in our arms knows that it's not an unmixed blessing. At times, it's hard. And not everyone has the resources for that. Not everyone has the same support, the same experiences, the same preparation. I wonder how many young mothers suffering depression feel at Christmas time that they've betrayed something primordial, that they stand outside of the whole trajectory of human history, that they are the sole terrible exception to a foundational human experience. And any one of us can feel out of step with Easter as well. It's not difficult to identify with the great events of Holy Week, with Palm Sundays of triumph and recognition, Maundy Thursdays of intimate meals with trusted friends and family, Good Fridays of betrayal and injustice, violence and death, Holy Saturdays of cold silence and the solitude of the tomb. But resurrection is a lot harder to grasp. When exactly was my resurrection time? Did I blink and miss it? Is it a season? Or was it a moment? That we should know the power of Christ's resurrection was, after all, the point of the exercise. So what is it supposed to look like and feel like? How do we know when we're in it? Or are we to join Peggy Lee in singing, "Is That All There Is?" 2 years after my bishop lost her husband in an accident, she said to me that the calendar would suggest that she should be experiencing resurrection time. If that's the case, she said, then resurrected life is hard. It's not a case of going to church on Easter Sunday morning and then doing brunch. It takes work. For the disciples, resurrected life started with the staggering realization that Jesus was once more among them, that the life and the joy and the excitement of his company was present again. But it was present, of course, in an entirely different way. It wasn't like before. Certainly there was no lying around on divans with a glass of wine talking about old times. The resurrection meant an often unrecognizable Jesus appearing unpredictably and returning them to basics, of their having to relearn all that they imagined they had mastered, of Jesus taking them step by step through the scriptures and the passages that referred to him, of all of the disciples returning to Galilee, going back to the very beginning and reviewing with Jesus all of the things they had seen and heard, and understanding, finally, the meaning behind those events. And then at Pentecost, of course, they launch into yet another way of being disciples. Now the risen life is evident in their energy and their fearlessness and their conviction. And it was the unquenchable risen life of Jesus burning within them and radiating through their words and actions that would in time take each of them to a martyr's death. The risen life demanded of them humility, ruthless honesty, soul-searching, repentance, courtesy, perseverance, discipline, courage. It was hard. I've heard that some of our parishes on Easter Sunday use champagne at communion instead of red wine. It sounds like a nice idea. Not a good idea, just a nice idea. Because it seems to me that the risen life is not about bubbles, it's about blood. The risen life in you and me is evidenced by our passion for the very things that Jesus lived and gave his life for. And in a society where the stranger and the alien are being at this very moment shunned and humiliated, where racism is celebrated and the poor are discounted as losers, where violence is lauded and freedoms are curtailed, where the vulnerable and the voiceless are being disenfranchised and expelled, where the very people whom Jesus championed and among whom he chose to spend his life are being vilified and ridiculed, where every effort is being made to exterminate by ridicule the risen life of Jesus. That life continues to abide in our voices, our signatures, our votes, our donations, our hands and feet and faces. It relies on us to give it flesh and blood and weight. The risen Jesus didn't only take the disciples back to basics, he takes every one of us back, goes through the scriptures chapter by chapter, recounts the key events of his life and teaching, and spells out not just what they meant then, but what they mean now, how they impact our present, by showing us this is what the reign of heaven would look like. This is what the kingdom of heaven would feel like. This is how the resurrected life would have us choose and act and speak and insist and protest. Richard Raw suggests that the reason St. Paul enjoyed such immense success in such a short time is that he gave human dignity back to a world that had largely lost it. One more God in Greece and Asia Minor, he says, would have meant little. But when Paul told shamed populations that the irrepressible risen life of Jesus dwelt within them, that they were temples of the divine, that not one of them was negligible or disposable, this made hearts burn with desire and with hope. I only learned during the week that between 8,000 and 10,000 Korean Christians were martyred in the 18th and 19th century because of the gospel's insistence on the dignity of every human being and the equality of all persons, so profoundly threatening a Confucian society grounded in class and privilege. Everyone wants to be told they are worthy, that they are good, even that they are worth dying for. Paul inaugurated a world that is still coming, that we are still longing for and striving to make present, where the human body is not a commodity to be degraded by verbal or physical or sexual abuse, let alone sold or traded, where every person's dignity is not an occasionally forced political concession, but an inalienable right and an unquestioned platform in our national dialogue. This is the risen life that you and I were baptized into, that Kai will be baptized into tonight. And while we were probably oblivious to it at the time, and maybe chose to be oblivious to it a whole lot of other times, what a grace and what a privilege now to play so vital a role in the healing of this society, this nation, this world. Healing also of our own hearts and memories, healing of losses and failures of our families and relationships. Hard work, yes. Life after resurrection has always been hard. It's why we return here week after week. It is full of revisiting, relearning, reconsidering, of confessing and repenting and restoring, and doing that with enormous vulnerability and openness to what God might be doing in us and with us and through us, but also with the deep assurance that God's Spirit is at work, that God's purposes will prevail. that in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. May the God who has brought us to this night, to this hour, bring us to know the place that is ours in the unfolding story of God's kind purposes. So may it be.